Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. We are here today to look at the New York Times 100 Notable Books of 2023. It's the holiday season, a great time of year. One, for decorations, which unfortunately you can't see as soon as I move my desk, but it is what it is. But also because we get a lot of year-end best lists. I love this time of year. I love going through these lists. We have already done Publishers Weekly's best books of the year. We've done Washington Post's 10 best books of the year. Now we have the New York Times 100 Notable. I'll have links down below to the Publishers Weekly list and the Washington Post list. I'll also have links to last year's New York Times 100 Notable and the one for the year before that. We're getting ready for the New York Times 10 best books of the year. Usually they can be found on this list, so I'll be speculating as we go through a little bit to see which books I think might be on there. There are fiction books and nonfiction books. Last year, they had them all lumped together. This year, they have separated them by category, so we'll sort of scroll through and see how many of these books we can cover. I'm going to try to move quickly so we don't spend a lot of time making this a really, really ridiculously long video. I'm going to try to avoid that. We'll see how that goes. First, I actually want to start with some surprising omissions from this list, some things that you are not going to end up seeing on this list. First is Let Us Descend by Jesmyn Ward. I'm very surprised that's not here, even in just this list of 100 notable books. And it does start making me wonder because Let Us Descend has kind of missed a couple of these best of lists. And it makes me wonder if people are not liking that book as much as Jesmyn Ward's previous books, Sing Unburied Sing and Salvage the Bones. It feels like a very big omission. A little less surprising is Alice McDermott for Absolution. That's a book that I had a lot of expectation for. I really thought that people were going to be very excited for that book when it was going to be released. And it's been a little bit more muted than I was expecting. Lauren Groff is also not here. I admit I wasn't entirely surprised when The Vaster Wilds did not make it onto Washington Post's 10 best books of the year. At the end of the day, Matrix, which is on my shelf right here, kind of had a similar problem. I love it. I think it's a great book, but it really was not recognized for a lot of things. And if Matrix, which I like better than The Vaster Wilds, couldn't be recognized, I'm not all that surprised that Vaster Wilds didn't make top 10 lists. However, when it doesn't make a list of 100 notable books, that starts to feel a little bit surprising as well. We also will not be seeing Wandering Souls by Cecily Pinn on this list. That is a book that I really loved that was released this year. And I think the fact that it didn't make the list is just going to show that it seems to be really flying under the radar. It was on the long list for the Women's Prize and then didn't make it onto the short list. And the only other omission I want to mention is Michael Cunningham's Day. Maybe that book feels a little too recent, but you know, the New York Times certainly accounts for these things, but it's a very recent book, was kind of pretty much just released. I haven't managed to read it yet, but a lot of people have been very excited about it, talking about how Michael Cunningham is a very celebrated and powerful writer, and so I'm a little surprised not to see it on a 100 notable list. Without further ado, let's really start getting into the actual list so we can start talking about these books and move through as many of the 100 as we can. Again, trying not to make this a really long video. We'll see how we do. Let's get started. All right, here we are at the start. A very good place to start. I love this animation that they have right here at the top of the 100 notable list. And let's get going. So again, we are going to start with the fiction side, and the first book is After Sappho by Selby Wynne Schwartz. Now, this book was on the long list for the Booker Prize last year. It didn't make it onto the short list. So I think it's making the list now because it took that long for it to come over into the United States. I've heard great things about it. I have not read it yet. And actually, Chelsea from Montana Book Company recommended it to me earlier this year, and I've been really thinking about reading it ever since, but I have not gotten around to it yet. Now, because we're a little crunched for time, I'm not going to read the descriptions for each of these books. I'm going to kind of invite you to pause the video if I'm moving a little too quickly and you want to see what they say about it. But yeah, After Sappho is definitely something that I would be interested in reading. I just have not gotten around to it yet. And it's just a quirk of time and publishing in the US compared to the UK that it's on the list this year compared to last. Now we have All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. I still have not managed to read an S.A. Cosby book. I think when I do, I'll probably read Razorblade Tears. And I would probably go back and do Blacktop Wasteland, but I've heard really good things about All the Sinners Bleed as well. So another one that I will definitely probably be getting to. I would need to start with Razorblade Tears and catch up to that one before I go any further, because I just hear so many really good things about Razorblade Tears that I feel like that's where I would need to go first. Now, no surprise at all, we have The Bee Sting by Paul Murray, the book that I think is probably most likely going to win the Booker Prize this year. I'm not planning to read it because I really didn't get along very well with Skippy Dies, which was Paul Murray's previous book. I thought it was overly long, and even the people who have liked this book when they've talked about it, I feel like I would just run into the same problems that I did with Skippy Dies. Maybe I will change my mind if it does win the Booker Prize. I think it will. But it's definitely been very consistently been popping up on these year-end best of lists. So it's possible I might give it a try at some point. I'm definitely not going to be trying to squeeze it in before the end of the year, though. That is not a thing that will happen. But we'll see. Maybe I'll change my mind about reading it. Stay tuned. The Booker announcement is coming. So we'll see if it actually does win. I think it will. Now we have Biography of X by Catherine Lacey. This was on the Publishers Weekly Best Books, or their Best Fiction Books. I don't remember if it was on Best Books or Best Fiction Books, but it was on one of those. And it sounds interesting. I'm definitely not going to prioritize it or run out and grab a copy, but it sounds interesting. And then we have Burnham Wood by Eleanor Catton. She is a previous Booker Prize winner, and I've heard good things about Burnham Wood. I definitely don't think it's something that I would be running out to grab, and definitely wouldn't be squeezing in before the end of the year. It is what it is. Now we have Blackouts by Justin Torres, which just won the National Book Award for Fiction. I'll actually link my reaction video to that down below. I really would like to read this book. I'm on the hold list at my library, and I'm sort of trying to practice discipline and not run out and purchase a copy. You know, I'm trying to spare my wallet here and prevent myself from having a disaster in the finance department, because it's the holiday season. You got to buy gifts for friends and family and all that stuff. So I need to have the physical book in front of me. I had access to the audio, and I asked a friend, would it be crazy to read the audio since this is a very visual book? They said, yes, it would be crazy. So I'm going to try to be patient and wait for the library. It's a little difficult. It's definitely a book that I want to get to. I'm hoping the library will come through for me before the end of the year, and I'll be able to read it. We'll see how that goes. Now we have Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. This book mostly exists to me as this cover. I remember seeing it many, many, many times, but don't actually know too much about it, except that it has something to do with Ted Bundy. Oh, yeah. Notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. I think it imagines the lives of the women, something like that. It did sound really interesting, but it would be something that I would get to next year, if at all. I have so many things ahead of it that I would be trying to get to. There are too many books to read. It's just the way of the world. Now we have Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. Now, I haven't been talking about speculation for what will be in the top 10. I think Blackouts certainly has a shot at being in the top 10, and I think Chain Gang All-Stars also has a chance, because Chain Gang All-Stars has really defied all expectations, because it is sort of a genre book, not the type of book that you would typically expect to see on year-end best lists, because, you know, there's an element of book snobbery about these things. A lot of the time, there just is. But Chain Gang All-Stars seems to be defying the odds and defying all conventions of genre and snobbery. So I still think it has a steep hill to climb to get into the top 10 for the New York Times, because, again, that's 5 fiction books and 5 nonfiction books. So it's got to beat a lot of other books to get into that top 5. But, you know, if anything's going to be clawing its way into something, why not Chain Gang All-Stars? That's kind of the plot of the book anyway. So I think it has a shot. But we'll find out what happens. They should be making that announcement relatively soon, hopefully soon, because I'm just desperate to see what they pick. Now we have The Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. This book does sound really interesting. Cutting for Stone also sounded really interesting. I just haven't gotten around to reading either of those books, and I probably would at some point. I think one of my ideas for next year is to try to read more longer books, since I've read a lot of short books this year, but I'm also trying not to have reading goals at all for next year. So that's a tough sell. But if I do focus at all on longer books, Covenant of Water would be a natural fit for that. So we'll see. Crook Manifesto by Colson Whitehead is sort of a sequel for Harlem Shuffle, and I have not read Harlem Shuffle yet, so I would need to do that before I could do Crook Manifesto, but I am very interested in reading both of them. Now we have The Deluge by Stephen Markley, which will make Jackie McMenamin very happy. Jackie, if you're watching this video, thumbs up. I still have not read a Stephen Markley book. I need to catch up to Ohio. The Deluge does sound really interesting, but I feel like I would do Ohio first. But again, there's so many books out in the world. I don't even know. Like, Ohio has been on my TBR since it came out, and I just haven't gotten around to it. And now Deluge is here, so I got to figure it out. I do really want to read a Stephen Markley book. I feel like Ohio would be first. Deluge does sound really interesting, though, and I've heard a lot of really good things about it, not just from Jackie McMenamin, but from other people as well. It sounds like a really interesting book. Now we have Eastbound by Melis de Carangal. This is familiar. I can't quite remember why, but I feel like I remember potentially being interested in reading it, but we don't have the time to spend a lot of time and effort going into what it's about right now. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I don't know anything about this book. This is the absolute first time I'm hearing about it. It does not immediately jump out to me as something that I would want to check out. So we're just going to keep scrolling in the interest of time. Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. Another one I have absolutely not heard of. It is helpful that they include these category descriptions. So fantasy and romance. I don't tend to get along with fantasy all that much. Psychological fiction can be okay for me, but it can also be a tough sell, because if you follow along on this channel at all, you know that I don't like the mystery thriller genre, or I tend not to get along with the mystery thriller genre in the wake of Gone Girl, because the way psychological thrillers frequently play out kind of gets on my nerves. So when I'm done filming this video, I'll probably spend a lot more time going through this list. I've tried to keep myself as fresh as possible, so you'll be getting accurate reactions to what's on this list. I skimmed through to see what some of the big hitters for the year. That's how I noticed that Jesmyn Ward was not on here. But I'm trying to be as fresh as possible, and the downside of that is that I haven't looked into a lot of these titles. So I'll do that when I'm done. It is what it is. I just really wanted to get through the list, and I feel like it's more fun if I'm fresh when I do so. Now we have Forbidden Notebook by Alba de Cespedes. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Another one I am completely unfamiliar with. It's historical fiction, and if you've read it, any of these three books that have been here, let me know what you thought of them, because I'm very new to all of them. Now we have The Fraud by Zadie Smith. I've only read one Zadie Smith book, and it was the one that was an update of Howard's End, which I thought it was just fine. I do want to go back and read White Teeth at some point, and The Fraud does sound really interesting. She has been doing great interviews that make it sound really interesting, so at some point I will probably be getting around to it. From, which is poetry by Monica Yoon. I don't read a lot of poetry. I do periodically try to prod myself into reading some, because I think it's good to challenge yourself and get out of those comfort zones every once in a while. So if you think this would be a good one for me to try, let me know in the comment section down below. Now we have a graphic novel, A Guest in the House by Emily Carroll. I'm completely unfamiliar with it, but when I do go through this list, I'll probably look at this one in particular, because I do like graphic novels. Not so into horror, but I'll take a closer look at this and see if it's something that I would read. Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. Least surprising thing in the world that this is on the list. I feel like this is pretty much guaranteed to be in the New York Times top 10 books of this year. I'm going to be extremely surprised if it's not. I think this is the heaviest hitter for the Pulitzer Prize next year. However, the heaviest hitter doesn't always mean anything. Sometimes the jury likes to pick a book that people have overlooked and bring it to attention of readers everywhere. So we'll see what happens, but it does feel like The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store is one of the biggest books of this year in terms of critical praise. So I am desperate to read it. I've been having all these library books and things keep getting in my way of reading it, but I really want to squeeze it in before the end of the year. And I will. That's what I keep telling myself. I will manage to fit it in before the end of the year. Now we have Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. I've heard really good things about this book, especially from Danny, who is that bookish bear on Instagram. It sounds really interesting. I actually have a copy on my shelf somewhere hereabouts, and I'm hoping to get to it. I don't think it's going to happen before the end of the year at this point, but I would definitely like to read it. People keep sort of comparing it to Demon Copperhead, and if you follow along, you know Demon Copperhead was my favorite book from last year. So it could happen. Now we have A History of Burning by Janica Oza. I don't really know anything about this, so it's another one I'm going to have to look into when we get back. If you have read it and you have thoughts, let me know in the comment section down below. Now we have A Horror-Tinged Thriller, Holly by Stephen King. Stephen King has surprised everyone by appearing on the New York Times top 10 books with 11/22/63. I don't think that'll happen again. I like a lot of Stephen King's earlier work. I've kind of stayed away from most of his more recent work, but I've heard some good things about Holly. I don't think I would be prioritizing it. This is probably not the one that's going to be creeping onto my pile of possibilities to read. But if you have thoughts about it, let me know in the comment section down below. I feel kind of inclined to take a pass, but let me know. Now we have A House for Alice by Diana Evans. I've heard some kind of mixed things about this book. I initially felt kind of interested in reading it when it was being released. And it's a family saga. I love a family saga. But I feel like I've kind of slipped away from it based on feedback that I've heard. So if you would like to change my mind, let me know in the description or comment section down below. I like this category. Very famous poem. Touche, New York Times. Touche. It's the Iliad by Homer. It's a new translation by Emily Wilson. I don't think this translation is going to get me to read the Iliad, but I'm really excited for all of the people who are excited about it. It's not my thing. Sorry. Ink, Blood, Sister, Scribe by Emma Torres. It's fantasy. I tend to blow right past the books that have this sort of title and the fantasy thing. Again, I occasionally challenge myself to get outside of my comfort zone and read something from a category that I typically don't. I think I would probably be more likely to read the other fantasy that we've already passed than this one. But I'm open to suggestion if you'd like to try to change my mind. So let me know. Now we have another historical fiction, Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. I know absolutely nothing about this, so we're going to keep scrolling. But if you have thoughts, let me know. Another one I have not heard of at all, Cantica by Elizabeth Graver. I hope that's the way you pronounce it. We're going to keep going. But if you have thoughts about this book, let me know. Land of Milk and Honey does sound really interesting. It's by C. Pam Zhang, who wrote How Much of These Hills is Gold? Something like that, which I heard a lot of really good things about. I have a copy. I just haven't gotten around to reading it yet. And this sounds like a really interesting book. I heard an interview with C. Pam Zhang on NPR's Book of the Day podcast, and it sounded really interesting. So not going to happen this year at this point, but I could potentially get to it at some point. Lone Women by Victor Laval. I have heard very mixed things about this book, and the negative ones have made me really feel like staying away, even though it is set in Montana. And the plot did sound really interesting to me when I first heard about it, but I feel like I'm staying away based on the context of the negative things I've heard about the book. But if you'd like to change my mind, let me know. Now we have Monica by Daniel Clowes, another graphic novel. I have not read a Daniel Clowes book as far as I can remember, but I've been kind of interested. So this is another one I'll probably come back and look at once I'm done with this video. Coming of Age Mystery, The Most Secret Memory of Men by Mohammed Mubugar Sar. I know absolutely nothing about this book, so I'm sorry. We're going to keep scrolling. Again, just got to keep going for time. Dystopia. Immediately feeling no. Social Satire, The New Naturals by Gabriel Bump. Another book I don't know anything about. And I feel like I'm really burned out on dystopia at this point because there have been good ones, but there have also been a lot of bad ones. And if you feel like this is one of the good ones, let me know, but I'm kind of inclined to pass. North Woods by Daniel Mason. This is one of the other heaviest hitters. I feel like last year, the biggest books of the year really boiled down to Trust by Hernan Diaz and Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. It felt like those two were in a battle royale for everything. All the ribbons, all the confetti, everything. And it feels like this year is coming down to the Heaven and Earth grocery store and the North Woods for that. Like they are the 2023 version of Trust and Demon Copperhead. Unfortunately, I haven't read either one of them yet, but I really want to get to both of them before the end of the year. Like if you told me, Greg, what two books would you absolutely like to prioritize before the end of the year? It would be The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store and North Woods by Daniel Mason. So hopefully I'll get to it before the year is over. Now we have Not Even the Dead by Juan Gomez Barcena. I don't know anything about it, so I'm going to keep scrolling. If you'd like to stop, you may feel free to pause. The Nursery by Sylvia Molnar. Again, I don't know anything about it, so we're going to keep going. And again, feel free to pause on any of these if you'd like to read the description yourself. Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. I've heard very mixed things. And again, just like with the Victor Laval book, the negative things I've heard have really made me hold off on it. So I don't think I'm inclined to get to it. I've heard some good things about Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. I have heard some mixed things, but mostly actually positive. So I would be interested in this, but it's a wealthy family saga. I love a book about a messy family. I just do. It's sort of my nature. So maybe this is a book that I would enjoy, but you know, we'll see. I don't have immediate plans to get to it, and sometimes that's a dangerous thing because then time gets away from you and you end up not getting to it at all. I've been hearing this name pop up. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it because I didn't prep for this video, so I don't want to mangle it. But I've heard a lot of people really excited for the release of this book. I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about this author's other work. So I'm going to keep going. Maybe I'll look at it later. But we're going to keep right on moving. The Saint of Bright Doors. I don't know anything about this one either. They've actually got me with a couple of these. Same Bed, Different Dreams by Ed Park. I've heard a lot about this one because it just came out recently, and the cover is gorgeous. I will give it that. But as soon as I started hearing what it was about, it sounded a little complicated. And even when people are like, oh, no, you have to read it, what they say is so complicated that it just seems like I'm just going to sit this one out. Happy for everyone who's excited about this, but I'm going to let everybody else enjoy it, and I will try to fit in a lot of the other books that more immediately grab me. Now we have Take What You Need by Idra Novi. I don't know anything about that book. I have read This Other Eden by Paul Harding, and this is also a finalist for the Booker Prize. If he does end up winning, he will be the first person to have won both a Pulitzer Prize and a Booker Prize in his career. I'm rooting for that to happen to someone. I like This Other Eden and respect it more than I love it, but I think it's a good book. I know if it does end up winning the Booker, a lot of people are going to be upset, and that's just the way it is. There's top 10 potential for the New York Times, but I don't know that it would make it in that top 5. We'll see. North Woods, by the way, I forgot to mention. That is something that I definitely think would be in the top 5. Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. I really enjoyed this book. I had stayed away from Ann Patchett for a long time because I disliked the book Run. But I'm so glad I tried one of her books again. Meryl Streep reads the audio. She's a delight, of course. And I would definitely go back and read more Ann Patchett books. I was a big fan of Tom Lake. Now we have The Unsettled by Ayanna Mathis. This popped up, I want to say, on Publishers Weekly's list. Maybe it was somewhere. But I don't quite remember what it's about. I remember hearing kind of mixed things in the comments about it. Victory's City by Salman Rushdie. I have not read it, but I know a lot of people have read it and really enjoyed it. We Could Be So Good by Cat Sebastian. I don't know anything about that book. Now we have... Actually, you know what? I don't remember. Is Western Lane on the shortlist for the Booker Prize, or was it just on the long list? I think it might be on the shortlist, but I don't remember. And I'm doing this unprepared, so I can't double check right now. It did sound like an interesting book. Definitely a cilantro book among the people who were reading the Booker long list. And it's funny that I don't remember if it made it onto the shortlist. I feel like that's my overall sensation about the Booker. It's my bitter Booker year. I haven't been too into a lot of the books that made it on the long list and into the short list. I wasn't interested in them, to be honest. Western Lane is one that did sound interesting to me. Witness by Jamel Brinkley. I am really excited to read this book. I have a copy. I want to get to it before the end of the year. It definitely has potential to be in the top 10 books of the year for the New York Times. I would slot it in if I were doing predictions, so we'll see what happens with that. I have heard of YN by Esther Yee. I think it was on a mid-year best of the year so far, and I remember nothing else about it, so we're going to keep going. I've read Yellowface, and I thought it was good. Not surprised to see it on the 100 Notable list. I thought it got too tricky as it went along, but I know a lot of people have loved it, so I'm not surprised to see it here, and not going to begrudge anyone who's happy to see it. And that is actually it for the fiction section, so let's begin nonfiction. First, we have The 272 by Rachel Swarns. I'm going to tell you right up front, I mostly read fiction. I do read nonfiction, but the percentage is really small compared to the amount of fiction that I read. So you're going to hear a lot that I don't know anything about this book or that I don't know much about it. And we're just going to scroll through the list and kind of keep going from there. It is what it is. So you can guess I don't know anything about this book, The 272 by Rachel L. Swarns. So after I'm done filming, I'm probably going to have to go through this list because I don't know anything about Anansi's Gold or The Battle of Ink and Ice or The Best Minds or Bottoms Up and the Devil Laughs or Built from Fire or Cobalt Red or Crossings or Daughter of the Dragon. I have heard of Doppelganger. Okay, thank goodness. I have heard of one of these books and heard good things about it. So there you go. Now we have Easily Slip into Another World. Don't know anything about it. Don't know anything about The Exceptions or Fireweather or The Great Escape or The Half Known Life. Wait, The Half Known Life is familiar. I think that was on either a best of list or it was on a list of the best books of the year so far. I can't remember which, but I have heard of that one. How to Say Babylon. I do know that one, and I want to read it. I've heard a lot of really great things about it, especially the audio, because apparently Sophia Sinclair reads the audio herself, and she apparently was also a poet, so the writing is really good. And I think there's definitely potential for this one to be in the top 10 books of the year for the New York Times. But I'm also really unfamiliar with a lot of the nonfiction books, as you can see. So maybe what I'll do if there's time is go through the nonfiction list, and then at the end of the video I'll film another thing where I say here are the ones I'm most interested in, because otherwise I feel like I'm just going to be scrolling and saying I don't know this one, but we'll see how the rest of the list goes. Humanly Possible, don't know it. Judgment at Tokyo, I do know because the Washington Post just included it on its top 10 books of the year, and it sounded really interesting to me. So yeah, that is one that I would also read. I would be willing to bet that King by Jonathan Eig is going to be on the top 10 books of the year. We'll see how that works out. Another one that I would definitely read. Don't know anything about The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. I don't know The Land of Hope and Fear. I don't know Liliana's Invincible Summer or Lives of the Wives or A Living Remedy. I don't know Master, Slave, Husband, Wife. Okay, Monsters. I know Monsters. I've heard really good things about it, and I don't know that I would read it, but I've heard a lot of really good things about it, so there's that. My Name is Barbara by Barbara Streisand. Of course I've heard of that one. And I was not planning to read it, except that I heard 2 interviews with Barbara Streisand about the book last week, and they sounded really interesting. Now, this is a long book. It's like 1,000 pages, but she made it sound so interesting that I'm actually thinking about seeking out the audio. Probably not this year, probably next year, but it does sound really interesting. She got me. You know, what can I say? Gay man wants to read the Barbara Streisand book. Groundbreaking. The Odyssey of Phyllis Wheatley, I don't know anything about it. Ordinary Notes by Christina Sharp has been popping up in certain places, so at least I've heard of that one. Oscar Wars by Michael Schulman. Interesting. So I've read that one. There you go. Put a notch down for me. I got one. I was really excited to read Oscar Wars. If you follow along, you know that I am really interested in the Academy Awards and all of that stuff. So I was so excited because this seemed like a book that would talk about the history of the Academy Awards in a very gossipy way. And it ended up being very serious and not at all what I expected. And I liked it, but I didn't love it. So I'm a little surprised to see it on this list. But what do I know? Our Migrant Souls by Hector Tobar. I've heard good things about that one as well. Page Boy by Elliot Page. I have not read yet. Joel read it and liked it. I would really like to, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. Poverty by America. I would definitely not be surprised if that's in the best of the year for the New York Times. I read Evicted, which was Matthew Desmond's previous book, and loved it. It's difficult, and I think that's the reason I haven't gotten to Poverty by America, because I feel like if it's going to be kind of infuriating, which is very Evicted. But yeah, I would definitely like to get to Poverty by America. It's a lot shorter than Evicted from what I understand. The Rediscovery of America by Ned Blackhawk just won the National Book Award for Nonfiction, and it had been on one of Publishers Weekly's best books of the year. And when it was on one of Publishers Weekly's, I think that's where it was, I said it sounded really interesting, but I wasn't too inclined to pick it up. And then the more I was exposed to it, the more I was like, that actually sounds like something that would be really important to read. So I actually have a hold on the book at my library. So here's one that I have not read yet, but am on a hold list at the library for and just waiting. The Rigor of Angels by William Eggington. I don't know anything about that one. I should also say I would not be surprised if The Rediscovery of America is in the top 10 for the New York Times as well. Schoenberg by Harvey Sachs. I do not know that one. I don't know Sink. I don't know The Slip. I don't know Some People Need Killing. I don't know Spoken Word, or A Thread of Violence, or Time's Echo, or The Undertow. I'm feeling pretty ignorant right now. Not gonna lie, this is not looking good for me. I don't know Unscripted, or A Poem. Oh, thank goodness, The Wager. Haven't read it, would like to. I actually just read The Killers of the Flower Moon by David Grann because I was trying to get ready to see the movie, and I've heard so many good things about The Wager. Another one that I would not be surprised to see on the New York Times 10 Best Books of the Year. I've heard so many good things about David Grann in general and about The Wager in particular. So it is another book that I'd probably be catching up to in 2024. Waiting to Be Arrested at Night is not a book I'm familiar with, nor is What an Owl Knows, or Wifedom, or You Have to Be Prepared to Die Before You Can Begin to Live. And that is the end of the list. So I'm going to have to spend a lot of time with the nonfiction list to go through and try to find some books that I find interesting. Hi, Editing Greg is here to say that I did take time to look through the whole list. I actually only found 2 books that I would immediately consider running out and reading, one from the nonfiction side and one from the fiction side. The first is the fiction book, We Could Be So Good by Cat Sebastian. The quick tease elevator pitch for this that I'm going to give to you is that it is a queer romance set in the 1950s. If you know me, you know I love a queer romance, just sold. The nonfiction book is Battle of Ink and Ice by Darrell Hartman, and my elevator pitch for this one is that it involves the media and fraud and an Arctic expedition to the North Pole and who got there first. It sounds really interesting. So those are the 2 books that I would immediately seek out and look to read. I also realized I didn't do a firm prediction of the top 10. This is going to be silly because I'm not going to be fully accurate. But so I think the 5 books that are most likely to make it onto the New York Times top 5 books in the fiction category are Bee Sting by Paul Murray, Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, Northwoods by Daniel Mason, Blackouts by Justin Torres, and Witness by Jamel Brinkley. I think they love to do something in translation or a smaller book, something a little oddball and out there. And I'm not going to attempt to predict that. So those are the 5 that I'm going to predict for fiction. The ones for nonfiction that I'm going to go with are King by Jonathan Eig, How to Say Babylon by Safia Sinclair, Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, The Rediscovery of America by Ned Blackhawk, and The Wager by David Grann. Let me know what you think will make the top 10 in the comment section down below. Back to the rest of the video. Definitely some surprises and some omissions. I can really only talk about the fiction side with authority in regard to that. If you are more familiar with nonfiction and there's something here that you don't see and you're a little upset about it, let me know in the comment section down below. If you have nonfiction books that you would recommend based from this list, let me know, because clearly I need to do a little bit better on the nonfiction side. But I just love fiction. That's the problem. I just naturally gravitate toward the fiction side of things. So, you know, it is what it is. And we've actually managed to get through the list in pretty good time, so I'm pleased with that. Let me know your thoughts on this list. What's here, what's not here, what you think will make the top 10. Again, that's 5 fiction books and 5 nonfiction books. It should be coming soon. Just let me know all of that. And if you have recommendations based on this list or any of the things that I've said, let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.